Video, view, admit all, message. Sweet. We've got some sound. Let's turn it up. Much better. All right. I'm going to rename this camera a little bit. Yeah. All right. How is everyone today?
Not too bad. How are you, Dr. Hurst?
Pretty good. Pretty good. So today we got stuff to talk about. We have some theories to talk about, and we have some project stuff too. So let's start out. First, I'll start out by sharing this with you guys so you can see it. Because I hadn't done this until just a minute ago. Thank you for reminding me. Let's see, share. And so in our syllabus for this class, we have schedule. We're coming up on spring break, but we're not going to abide by that timeline. We're going to move that term paper back since we're still drafting it out. And so what I'll do is I'll revise that and I'll give you a timeline over here in Blackboard. But right now I've got term paper topic at the very bottom of the page in Blackboard if you go into our shell. I should probably put that underneath of that, but we'll put it right here for right now. I'll move it in again here in a second, probably. And so what we'll do is start there and see what do I have in here. Yeah, no, you got it right there. Never mind. So topic and theory. There you go. Good. Never mind. Get rid of that one. So it's 10 points there. Good. And so the next one I need to open up is this one. And we're going to revise that back a little bit. I'll make that one the 25th. And since we've got these two, this one, the next one we'll work on is the literature review. And so we've been working on the, what was it? The triangulation, the process for doing that in here the last couple of classes. And so we'll hop back into theory for a little bit to talk about some more theories because we've got our control and learning theories. We've already been talking some about learning. Here's where the book will talk about them a little bit more. And we'll talk about framing a little bit too, because there's some, I don't want to say interpretation, but the links between these theories are strong for some theories and a little bit weaker for others. And so as we talk about that, you'll kind of see what I'm talking about. So we already got topic and theory. That's what I need to do. I need to go back and let's do that. We'll put the lit review in there next. And so I'll add that in just a second. Aside from that, let's move into maybe the textbook kind of thing right here. So we are in chapter 6 was social structure theory. Those were the ones we talked about last time, social disorganization theory. I don't know if we got all the way through all the stuff they had in that chapter because they should talk about broken windows in here because sometimes it'll come up in here. Sometimes it won't. Talk about cultural deviance, structural. We should probably talk about broken windows just because that's something that'll come up every now and again under this area. And then we'll jump over to the social processes stuff. So sometimes with this theory, the social disorganization, what you'll see is that sometimes people tie into broken windows. And I don't know if we talked about that much. Did we talk about broken windows theory in here yet? Okay. So the basic tenet of this is I want to say Wilson and Kelly. And this would have been in the 70s, I think. I'd have to double check that for the year. I've got it if you want to see it. Basically what it is for this one is that pop down because I'm going to need them here in a second probably. Okay, well, so we start dealing with broken windows theory where the overlap is. The social disorganization theory deals with crime and how disorganized areas deal with crime. Well, what they did is something similar. They're dealing with similar kinds of areas. You start dealing with the areas that are high crime, also low poverty, that kind of stuff. And so what they did is they took a vehicle into several different parts of the city to see how long it would take for that vehicle to be vandalized. What they found was when they just dropped off the vehicle, nothing happened. And so nothing at all happened. And so what they ended up doing is going through and breaking a window out of that vehicle in those different areas. And what they'd see is as they did that in relatively short order, everybody would start vandalizing the vehicle. And so it was literally, if you left it, no matter where you left it, it didn't do anything because you had that signal that no one cares. And once you had that, that's whenever crime would take over. And that's sort of the you see any of that zero tolerance policing stuff? that's the underlying sentiment here is this, is that signal right there is what's going to send off crime. You show that you don't care, well, then that's whenever crime starts coming in, and that's why you'll get the enforcement of, okay, your grass is too tall, there's too many vehicles in your yard, there's all that little minority, like not minority, but minor things that sometimes we do the cross product of that where you look at minor infractions in the here. You see there's the treatment there. They might be trying to do this to make it better, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. From there, you talk about, we're going to talk about those. We need to move into theory, social processes. So the book will talk about it in a different way. It approaches it from giving you what it typically does. It'll give you a story and then start to outline the theory a little bit. Okay. So this one's often tied in social disorganization. Doesn't have to be, it's more police. Really interesting about it is the actual publication itself was not in a peer-reviewed journal. It's in the Atlantic, I think. And so it's like that's not the way they commonly do it. Those people were policing background correctly. So institutions of socialization, we start dealing with that. We're going to deal with social processes. It's all about how things are processed. Now, first, you have the socialization itself, how we socialize, how we get to where we can interact with each other one-on-one kind of thing. So here it talks a little bit about social process theories alongside critical elements of socialization. Yeah. Prominent among these elements are family, peer group, school, and church. So they focus on each of those. It starts out with those. I mean, some degree you're dealing with those social institutions themselves. And that's the process. What actually gets you to take in their values, that socialization process. I don't want to tell you about that. So you can look at it in terms of like common controls, that kind of stuff. Here, what it is like single family homes, that kind of stuff. They'll move into each of these sections subsequently. They're going to be a big part of the theory, but where they come in is like, okay, single family homes. You already know that one of your greatest predictors for criminality is family structure because of the socialization that comes in there. Now, whether it's the socialization itself, whether it's the resources, the time, all those things run simultaneously. Here, what we're going to focus with are the socialization sides of it. Can be like, yeah, you can see the effect, but what you'd really be focusing on is the oversight, time, that kind of stuff. But just from the outset, family structure is a big one. I mean, if you look into it, it'll tell you a little bit about some of that stuff here. Major determinant of behavior, parenting factors such as ability to communicate, provide discipline, all that stuff are critical for developing people. What I want to tell you, there's a guy, you probably see him cited in this book. His name's, I think it's Farrell, Farrell. He's probably one of the more recent people I've seen to say this statement as a definitive statement where it's, you can cite it. It is one of the strongest and most consistent and most powerful predictors for human behavior, quality of life, and all of those things, family structure. That's how critical it is. And so this book kind of talks about that and the changes in our society, how those have gone away for the large part. I shouldn't say gone away, I say single parent households have started to overtake those that dual, right? The traditional kind of way. And so as you track that in the places that it's changing, and as you look at the crime rates, you'll see those effects. You'll also look at the people themselves, and you'll see the effects that it has on their lives. Usually start talking about crime and that kind of stuff. Difficulty of socialization processes, all of that. Then you have family stress itself. It lists out here. Gives you some things that have been subject to study, like here it mentions parental efficacy. Basically, are they able to do their job kind of thing. Here it talks a little about some of the stuff that happens, effects of divorce, family deviance, violence and abuse cycles, all that stuff. It moves into education next, because that's the next big institution. So when you start dealing with social processes, the big thing you need to start thinking of are institutions, but don't just think of it like in terms of buildings kind of things, or like, education is an institution. Think about it as in all the things that provide those those groups that provide you those morals and values, the things that you use to determine right and wrong, right? So here it's going to be your family, it's going to be things like education, going to be things like church, work, all of those things. Because the more things that you are a member to, the more of those institutions you are attached to, the more likely it is that those principles that they espouse, you hold to. And to some degree, your attachment to them is going to be a function of that, right? The closer alignment your principles or things align with whatever it is you're doing, the better it is. Okay. Educational, race, resources, all the things involved with school, peer relations. I might skip ahead because you already know about peer relations. We'll go into social learning theories, right? So we talked a little about social learning theories already in here. I said, starts out with Sutherland. He's differential association. So the more people I'm in contact with, the more of them that hold these criminal, I don't say tendencies. I forget how he phrased it in terms of definitions. The way I look at things, the way I define crime is more acceptable. The more likely I am to go ahead and repeat those same behaviors. So if I'm surrounded by people who are criminals and I'm friends with them, the more likely it is that I'm going to have those same kinds of viewpoints, and the more likely it is I'm going to in turn engage in those types of things. That's differential association. I think the next one they mentioned in here is differential reinforcement. Here's social learning theories. It goes differential association. That's Sutherland and Cressy. So I like the fact they point out their deaths, that kind of thing in the book, to identify just how long they had an effect. So differential association, its principles. Criminal behavior is learned. It's the byproduct of interacting with other. And learning it happens within intimate personal groups, meaning the size of its impact has to do with the strength of those relationships. What are we talking about here? You're talking learning, you're also talking social networking, right? That's the other side of this. This is also social networking. And if you look back in terms of age, I think you're pretty early in that time frame, right? Going over 100 years ago kind of thing. It's like, yeah, you're getting back some of the early stuff on that. Next thing, so intimate groups, learning crime involves assimilating techniques, including motives, drives, rationalizations, and attitudes. That's what you're learning from those people that you're in friends with. Specific direction of motives and drives is learned from perceptions of various aspects of legal code in terms of favorable and unfavorable. That's why I start bringing in the culture conflict and how people define things differently. When a person becomes a criminal, he or she receives more favorable than unfavorable consequences. So you're sewing in deterrence a little bit. Differentials association, different frequency, duration, priority, intensity. And that's the process right there. I'll actually share that because I want you guys to see that online. Oop, right here, share screen. Share screen. Bring up, not that screen, this screen. I want that one. I want this one. Not that one though. Right here. Right here. Here's what you start looking at. One of the ways you can start measuring things, right? Differential associations vary in frequency, duration, priority, and intensity. Okay. So basically what they're saying is you surrounded by your peers, and there might be some degree, whether it's in a singular institution, or maybe it's like the churches over here, where some of your peer groups going to come out of that, some of your peer groups. And so you start seeing the attachments that you get across those things. Here they mention about, the distance between you and your peers. The social networking side is where there's been a massive change in our society. Basically, what you need to see here is they say that the closer these ties are, the more likely it is for the behavior to be transmitted, or the belief, or the attitude, or whatever. So this is a function of that distance. That's one side of it, right? The thing with theories is the good thing about ideas. Conflicting statements can be true. Conflicting things can be true all simultaneously. What I mean by that is, okay, so this is true. The closer you are with people, the more likely it is you're gonna pick up their behaviors. That's one measure, right? I'll show you a different one. I like this one because it's from the 70s. It's a different class. This one over here. Right here. 70s. Strength of weak ties. So this was 1970s, not long after they started doing this stuff. Social networking. Procedure, diversion micro level implications for one small scaled interaction. The strength between two people. Degree of overlap between the friendships varies directly with the strengths of their ties. What he's doing is he measures how far can you travel in these networks, right? The closer you are, this information doesn't travel very far. The strength of those weak ties is the less associated your peer groups are. Let's say you got a small pocket of friends that are way outside of the norm for your normal friend group. Yeah, you can have the ability to transfer information this way. It's less likely, but the distance there is different. And now you start to understand a little bit more of the nuance associated with one aspect of this theory. Everything can be classified in positive, neutral, negative, and if you look at it in enough different perspectives, you start to see everything does actually meet in the middle, right? Everything's going to be mixed. There's a debate for everything. The theories set up a reason for why we're taking a particular stance. Okay, that's enough about that. We're over here. Okay, process for learning criminal behavior is association with criminal and anti-criminal patterns. Expresses general needs and values, not excused by general needs and values because non-criminal, same. Okay, so you have, they're dealing with that conflict. You yourself might have conflicting things associated with this. It's all about how you navigate those choices. The socializations process is to some degree dictating what you weigh, how you weigh it, and what options you have there, right? How you align your morals, your principles, your values. These institutions espouse that to some degree, whether you're talking church, school, family themselves, right? You'll pick up those to some degree, and it's you yourself, what you have and what you do. You multiply that by every person that's in the room, now you've got a social theory. Okay. Differential reinforcement's a little bit different because here it says Ronald Akers and Burgess in 1966. Yes. We also have that psychological side where they're talking about the same kinds of things, right? Negative, positive, reinforcements, punishments. This is where they start applying that over here. So the differential reinforcement. You have that same process here, and now we're going to take into account how much positive, how much negative we're actually taking, those types of things. See how we're rewarding it, how we're punishing it, what gets reinforced, what goes extinct. Right, that's basically all I say on that one. The next one, neutralization. They put it in here. I kind of sometimes put it at the end of social control because I'm talking learning here. I'm talking control over here. It's the same kind of thing. It's part of that same social process, but different levels, right? This is you individually. You start dealing with groups collectively. You move over here to these institutions. These are the things you're looking at large. Okay. As you start looking at, well, you're looking at the learning side, control side, what you're going to find is that dissonance. Psychological term, cognitive dissonance. You've heard that term before, yeah? Okay. Most of you probably have. You're holding 2 points that don't agree at the same time. It's like, to some degree, there's that conflict there, and to some degree, that's actually how reality works, and you have to kind of run with it a little bit. There's actually several points of discussion in that. We'll focus on the one at hand, neutralization. So let's say you've got all this in place, and you've got all of the pressures associated with being a human, right? Member of these institutions, You're around all the people you socialize with. All of them are gonna have different expectations of you. How do you resolve that and what do you do? Not an easy thing. Right? It's just like some months come in, so they identify. It says. The way that they do it is you find some way to relieve yourselves of the psychological burden associated with whatever it is you're dealing with. This will outline it for you in terms of, okay. Neutralization theory points out that most committed criminals and delinquents are not involved in criminality all of the time, right? It's only a small part of their time. Just like we said, hey, that shape, you see the number of people involved in crime over time, the number of people involved in crime in general in their lifetime, the number of places where you look at crime, you see that same pattern where it concentrates on certain things. They start identifying that here in this process of drift, right? So you move from one side to another, and how we do it, well, here are some learning techniques that they've used that they identify, and that you'll, as we talk about them, you can probably sit and literally assess any type of situation you've personally been in where it's like you're dealing with someone who's being flighty and you can't quite narrow down what exactly is going on, kind of thing. Like, here, I'll show you. I think that's back under here. Go back one. So if you want any of these, let me know. This is the original article from Psychics and Monsa. American Sociological Review. Of course, it's annotated. Yeah. Starts outlining, techniques for committing, motives, drives, rationalizations. So outline the same things here as your textbook, right? And here's what they are. Oh, that's not, they're not actually doing. Here's what they are actually doing. Denial of, first up, responsibility. Right? It's not my fault, is what it says here. Result of forces beyond their control or accidents. Situational, right? It is what it is. That kind of thing. Okay. Injury or victim. Dealing with harm. Condemn, says condemners. And appeal to higher loyalties. Okay. Overlap. What do I want to tell you about that? They'll give you a nice little circle there. Stop for a second so I can show you what that is like. Okay. If you look at this, all these are justifications. They're ways that people are trying to justify their actions, release themselves of that burden. Responsibility is a big one. It's not my fault. I'm not involved, that kind of thing. Or maybe it's situational, right? This one's actually really helpful if you're after dealing with stuff. Stop and this is where I come in contact. This one, use it. Driving. Deal with someone who cuts you off, it's driving, and it's over. Probably this, right? You don't know what their situation is. It's not my position to make a judgment. Very easy way to relieve yourself of the burden. Oh, I'm angry, right? So there's positives to all of these things too. But it's just in terms of crime, the negative is you're abdicating your responsibility by saying it's not yours for whatever reason. Situation is usually big in there. Next one is you deny the fact that there's any harm at all. Whether it's, well, it's not really that bad, or, well, you came out of it bad, or whatever. It's just, yeah, there's no real harm of what I did, even though there was. So they're minimizing what they did and its effects, or they're minimizing the person themselves. I don't really care about this person. Or you know what? They had some other reasons why this is okay, right? Condemning your condemners and appealing to higher loyalties. Those are more of the principled ones. I'm gonna say it's a situation or say it's the person. I'm gonna say it's more principles. Right? I did this because of the fact that this higher loyalty is more important, right? It's the needs of the many versus the needs of the few. Since everybody needs, I'm gonna, instead of looking to, try to address everybody's needs to some degree, I'm gonna see which needs I need to meet and which ones I don't need to meet, right? The ones I need to meet, those are the ones that are more important. I'm gonna appeal to those higher loyalties, right? The ones that starve and die don't. It's like, you gotta be careful with that kind of stuff, because that's how people do it. Condemning the condemners is the same kind of thing. How dare you, whenever you've done this or whatever. It's like, you've done something that's equally as bad, or maybe it's worse. So now at this point in time, your ability to even judge has shifted. It's like, so all you're trying to do is neutralize the negative associated with you and basically to remove any use of judgments there to some degree, right? They're removing the psychological burden is what it is. That burden is great. Okay. So that's a little bit about learning theory, differential association, differential reinforcement. And then in terms of control side, we've mentioned the org institutions and how it works. Let's see what the book says in terms of that. There's down here, evaluating learning theories, social control theories. Okay, here you go. Socialized. You start talking control. When people use that word, they see different things. Most people probably think that first time where you're talking about self-control, that you yourself have some part of it. Yeah. That's a harder thing to measure. Because anytime you're reaching inside someone's mind to try to figure out stuff like that, it is a very difficult thing to do. So one, there's that. On the easier side, you can deal with institutions and their connections, but you can look at it either way. When you start dealing with institutions themselves, it's that conformity thing. That's the big part. So to be a member of that group, you need to conform to it to some degree, as those institutions have. I guess this isn't going to let me go beyond. It's going to go into Hershey. There we go. That's where it's going to go into social bonds. All right. Here it says the reason why it's control is because they're going to damage those relationships. You don't want to burn them, right? And so without those ties, you're free. Commit crime. With them, you're controlled. And the way that they do it, attachment, commitment, common moral beliefs, and involvement right here. Attachment, commitment, belief, involvement. And it kind of hits some of the highlights there, right there. And so those are the four factors, I guess you'd say, that you look at those relationships between these institutions and those persons to see to what degree their relationships to those institutions vary on those factors, and that it determines crime. Right? That is social control. Testing it. Yeah. There's plenty of tests for that and criticism for both this and learning theory. Right? Influence of friendships, influence, failure, deviance, all that stuff. Social reaction theory is where you get to labeling. Right? So this is 30 minutes in. No, we'll do some labeling. Okay, so you have steady. Next one. Labeling. Okay. Now this is one that usually gets covered pretty well in other classes. You've seen labeling theory before? Yeah, good. You guys have also talked about labeling theory before? You'll get it in in terms of like theories and their overall schemes, labeling is one that sometimes, how would you classify? In social processes, but you have the power dynamics of other theories that are at play here for those who are in control of institutions and that kind of stuff. And those who receive the labels. So that's one part of it, because you can see certain groups are not treated the same when it comes to labels. But here's where you get at it. So behaviors that are considered criminal are highly subjective. Those in power define it, and they use those same labels for, instead of the acts, the people themselves. Right? And that's positive and negative. So basically what they're saying is here is that since there is some subjectivity to it, what we call it is what it is. That's labeling theory, right? I see this bad behavior of yours. I'm going to call it bad, and I'm going to call it worse than what it is, and I'm going to treat it as such. And since I'm not treating it as such, you are now a bad person because I've already identified your bad behavior. I'm going to increase my level of scrutiny upon you because I already know that you're a bad person. As I do that, what ends up happening is you end up reoffending, because now the level of scrutiny I'm watching you is increased because I've already identified bad behavior. It's a feedback system. That's what they're identifying, right? Starts out with something small and it builds relatively quickly. Most times this gets talked about, it's talking about juveniles in school, right? It's not the fact so much that you're doing anything bad, it's that you're inattentive and you're overactive. You won't hold still. Okay, now I'm going to make sure that you hold still. You had trouble holding still before. Now that I'm putting pressure on you to perform in that way, when I wasn't putting pressure on you before, now you're having a lot of trouble holding still. It's not going to get better, right? And that's what the label does. At some point, that transfers from whatever that was to that person, and it balloons out from there, right? And it starts out it can start out very innocuous, be very insidious. You won't see it until, hey, it's much later in their school careers. You start talking junior high, high school, that kind of thing. Yeah. See what I tell you in terms of theories. Yeah. So Becker. Social groups create deviance by making rules whose infractions constitute deviance. By applying those rules to particular people and labeling them as outsiders. From this point of view, deviance is not quality of the act of the person commits, but rather a consequence of the application of the others of rules and sanctions to the offender. Okay? You want to see it in actions. Marijuana versus alcohol. Right? Different points in time, you'll see that they're treated in different ways. It's just like, how do we as a society want to label it? Is it something that's acceptable or something that isn't? Right? It's deviance. Is it something to criminalize or something that isn't? We start looking at groups. Are there certain groups we want to criminalize their actions more than others? Maybe, right? And it's hard to tell that because most people won't say that right out now. There was a time in our history where we would do that. We don't anymore. Both good and bad comes out, right? But now we don't have as many as the problems, yes, but now we have a whole new set of problems. People don't talk about it and they need to. There's always that going on. Started out, he was dealing with juveniles and gangs, if I remember correctly. That one too. Let's see. What do I need to tell you about that? Because he talks about outsiders. He's talking about the groups. It's also the groups and that socialization process within them themselves. So it's not just at the individual, it's groups too. And so it starts out behavioral, individual, groups. It's one that literally balloons at every level. Okay, here it gives persons whose deviant identity becomes damaged. How bad does it go? How quickly does it go? And in terms of who's sensitive to what, that's where these types of theories come in and it's a real nuance. What are they doing? Like the labeling theory, or any of them? That's where the real value comes in. For example, in this one, right? Most of you think schools and kids and that kind of stuff. It's not just that though. It's like no, I can't say. I won't go that. Kids their actions, how they get labeled, and their consequences, how it leads people to crime. It's like you can find anecdotal evidence that will make it very, very, very easily apparent. The worst one I heard was actually relatively recent. It popped up in my mind, so I say it for an example for this kind of stuff. It was a woman, I want to say mid-30s, something like that. New York, basically what happened with her was a real estate agent. One bad decision and one public exposure away, loses job, career, of course, social ties, friends, suicide, right? And that's in the course of like 6 months. So it's like this stuff has a huge effects at the individual level. When you start ballooning it across people and aggregating, it doesn't do less, it does more. Okay, consequences of labeling. What does it say? Yeah, you feed people. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Here, it's successful to creation ceremonies. Yeah, when you give someone a label, that'll always attach to them. Some of those will last forever, right? Some of those actions, if you do them, you'll never forget them. The late great comedian Norm Macdonald had a joke about that, which I will share.
Norm was the best. Rest in peace.
Yes, he was excellent. I love him just because he was really good at there are times when he specifically wanted to bomb because he enjoyed that more because it made everybody else so uncomfortable. And so he'd go in there and he'd start telling bad jokes because everyone started running and try to walk out kind of thing. And so it's like that's kind of comedian he wants because he doesn't really care, he's just trying to have fun. So his joke, he's like, he's telling a story about, I can't remember if this is his dad or his uncle or something like that. It's like, I think it's his dad. Like, my dad, he helped build that house over there. It's like he built that, 35 years ago. It took him a good couple of years. He worked with a couple people. It's like no one calls him a house builder, right? He went over there. He worked for a baker for a few years too. It's like whenever he was younger, no one calls him a baker. He made love to one goat, right? It's like, yes, there you go. There are some things that you do that as soon as that label attaches, and it doesn't take much to attach it, it's there forever, right? I can give you examples of this where they do it on the social front that's on the public side. I said the word indicted, right? What the hell does that mean? Most people don't know. All it means is that when the prosecution gives a case for something, they can say that it's more than likely you did it if nobody presents any other evidence. It doesn't mean anything. It just means we're going to move on in the process and see if you actually did something. But they use it for that label, right? And so you've got that aspect that runs the whole time. And then you have how people identify themselves, right? One problem facing those bearing a criminal label sends a negative message to employers, right? And so think about how many different feedbacks, how many people want to attach themselves to someone who is a deviant? How many people want to have that person in their social sphere? It's like saying, we're going to bring in some Section 8 housing. We're going to put it in your neighborhood. People are already screaming, let alone going over there and talking to them. Like, yeah, that's people. Joining deviant cliques, yes. Let's see notes on there. Retrospective reading. Yeah. Basically, what they're doing is they're trying to get someone to reframe their past by doing that. It's a way that you go back, reevaluate the things that you've done, but instead of looking at the thing that you pulled from it, you try to pull something else from it. That's helpful in terms of framing. It's a good framing device. That's individual level ways to address them. Primary and secondary deviance. Here's where I start talking about that a little bit. I think I've alluded to that a little bit. So primary and secondary deviance. Here. Primary. Norm violations of crimes have little influence on act or quickly forgotten. Secondary. You've drawn attention. And you got that label. You also have it in terms of initial crime and then its replication. Like, so you get those terms in a couple of places. There we have the labeling process. What else do we need to do? Deviance amplification. Yeah, we already talked about that. Criminal careers. Differential enforcement. That's what I think I want to talk about. Differential enforcement. Boom. So if you've got this issue where you have different crimes, different places, and people who cluster in different places at different times, different peoples, how do you address it? Well, there are some things you don't do, right? This first one's kind of a good example of it. You don't want the law to be applied differently, specifically those who have power and those who don't, right? The next section talks about racial profiling. The racial profiling that matters for our society, it won't always matter. There'll always be differences between people and people groups and their differences, right? What matters is how you make those decisions and how you do it. Here they start talking about racial profiling and that kind of stuff. Does it happen? Yes. On the research side, how do you catch it? They're not good at it. I'm trying to remember how much I've talked to you about racialized research in this field. Racial research. There's a lot to talk about there. First, anytime you're dealing with anything like this, you have to recognize the fact that whether it's things of this nature or things of organizations, corruption, anything that harms income, anything that people are trying to, that they've known that they've done wrong, they usually take additional steps to purposefully hide. So it makes it really, really hard to study these things accurately. So whenever you get to some of the racial stuff, what we find is that they'll make links or they won't make the links. It'll be more of an illusion or inference. That if you see a racial disproportion there, that's in some ways reflective of both the problem and the policing. That's how we address it, because we can't always separate out the two. And to do that, it's going to take some research study for whatever it is that they're actually studying. And so they'll go far enough to say, this disproportion is found, which supports some of the historic stuff that we've seen. So they start building it that way. What you need to do is you need to make sure that you're taking full account for what's common. Because you can see that you deal with organizations, you start dealing with multiple levels. So it could be the individual officer, could be the culture. That would be the one you really want to find out. Is it the culture that's doing it? Is it the individual officer? Is it like one administrative decision kind of thing, where someone just made a decision and they weren't paying attention or they did it on purpose, right? Because those are all vastly different things. And sometimes they don't really address that too well. Then here they talk with you about the fact that it does happen. In terms of, no, I won't go into anecdotal evidence on that one. Race is not the only factor. It applies labels, yeah. Long-term effects. Well, everything you'd expect with everything moving in negative direction over long terms. Whether you're talking quality of life, income, whether you're talking education, whether you're talking anything, you're really talking about just it moves everything to a negative direction. Okay. Opportunities we've already talked about. No, is it valid? I don't care about that. Processes and public policy. So anytime they start talking about policies and that kind of stuff, I kind of glance over that a little bit less because it's not as much the focus of the theory itself. It is another part of it. It's the evaluation to see if we're actually following the theory, to see if the results they're getting actually align with them. So that's another stuff. I didn't do so much of that evaluation stuff. And so summary, yeah. Social processes, family, education, the institutions you attach to all have a feedback into you, right? To some degree, you join them because you align with them. To some degree, they let you align, you join them because they align with you. You need each other. And then you have this whole process that's involved in both positive and negative directions that runs through it all. Questions? Now, that's a quick way to get through social processes, right? We covered touch back into learning, we hit control, and we start touching labeling a little bit. And if you guys want to see the any source documents for some of the stuff, I got quite a bit of it. Things I've accumulated over the years, so I can get that to you if you're interested in any of these topics. Okay, and with that, let me add this in here. I'll put term paper talk. Term paper talk was already in there. I was thinking of a different class. I think this one I put up here. Assessments will say assignment introduction. Draft. Submit your initial introduction here. And we'll set that for Monday, the 25th. So that'd be the week that we get back. And we'll say 15 points. 10 points, 15 points. And then we'll do 25 points, and that's the first half, and then revise everything. You get double points. All right, cool. Now with that, and I'm going to change the state right here. Who has questions about papers, topics, anything like that? Because now would be the time where we can take it and run with it if you want to for the next 3 minutes, or we can sign off for the day. Your guys' choice. What do you want to do? Sound off.
You said the introduction is due the 25th.
Yeah, we'll do it for introduction. Okay. And so what we'll do is probably about a week after that, we'll make the next section due, because you'll have that time to work on it between here and now too. And so you'll get the feedback from the introduction pretty quickly after you get it to me. And then probably about a week after you get the lit review, I'll get you more on that. Plus, as I get the introduction, I'll send you some more sources. If I see some stuff that's like, ooh, you need to go look over here, because it's a good idea for you. And then once you have that, we're cooking the gas. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? No? All right, we'll call it a live on for today then. You got 2 minutes left. That's an extra 2 minutes. I'm going to use those 2 minutes. I don't know how, but they'll get used. With that, y'all have a great day. If you have any questions, you need anything, let me know. And see, we got this is chapter. This is chapter 7. I think there's chapter 9 in this section. So whenever we get through chapter 9, we'll do a review for the next quiz and exam. I'll probably go ahead and make the quiz available probably within the next couple of days, because that's going to be one just like the last one. They'll be unlimited. So you just go and take it until you're ready, and then when that exam comes available, you have a week to take that. Cool. All right. Well, you all have a great day, and I will see you on Wednesday.
Thanks, Dr. Hurst. Take care.
My pleasure. One more thing. If you need me tomorrow, I probably won't be here tomorrow because I'm traveling a lot this week for the university and more next week. So I'll be a little bit hard to get a hold of, but if you need me, email me, because I am watching. I'll talk to you all later. Bye.